Hi, this is Dr. Georgia. I hope you find today's message a blessing in your life. We want to make sure that we continue to provide these video messages for you when you can't come to church, or for those of you who live in a different state, or we noticed recently we have a lot of people in even different countries who are tuning in. So if that is you and you can donate to us, we invite you to hit that donate button just below the message here. So thanks so much. Let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now if you just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that you are indeed whole, perfect, and complete right now. You are whole, perfect, and complete. You are as free now as you ever will be, and that's completely free. You are as compassionate now as you could possibly be. You are crazy rich right now. You are so creative right now that you make Mozart look like a slapper. You have complete ability to have victory over your addictions right now. You have the self-confidence of Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu right now. You have relationships right now that are filled with compassion and passion and joy right now. That's what we have right now. Now somebody here is thinking, must be thinking, what is she? Who? Is she in the peyote buttons? What is wrong? What's going on? No, I'm absolutely talking to each and every one of us, you and me. The spiritual truth of who you are is that you are whole, perfect, and complete, and you have everything you need at your disposal to be completely happy, soul-filled, and successful. But until we can feel it, until we can walk with it, until we can kiss it, until we can spend it, it doesn't matter. Our job here as spiritual people in community is to close the gap between the spiritual truth that you are whole, perfect, and complete, and you have it all, and that state of limited thinking that we sometimes get caught up in, that we can't have it all, that it's not our ability. Somehow we get that limited thinking along the way, and oftentimes it comes to us without our conscious permission, that limitation thinking. But it's time now for us to let it go. We have to let that go. We have to follow in the footsteps of Joseph from the Bible, who started out as a young man with life ahead of him, became a slave, turned into a prisoner from a slave, and then became the ruler of the very country in which he was enslaved and imprisoned. How did he do that? He began to take a big leap. Every time he took a big leap. Well, I'm working with a book right now that some of you are familiar with because I've talked about it before. I got it off my shelf because maybe like some of you in the room this morning, I have a limited thought that is bothering me. Sometimes we know what our limited thoughts are because our life isn't going how we want it to go. We want to do something and something is sticking and we can't make it move. And that way we know we have a limited thought. Well, I'm in a place in part of my life right now where I have a limited thought and I'm not moving in an area that I want to move in. And so I went to my bookshelf. I did treatment around it. I prayed around it. I talked to my spiritual advisor about it. I've done everything I knew how to do. And then I remembered this book. It's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I went and got it off my shelf and I started to read it. And as I began to become familiar with the ideas and refamiliarize myself with the content of this book, I began to see some stuff move, some shift in my consciousness around this one thing that I can't seem couldn't seem to break, and I began to see some movement. So I went back and I looked at my notes to see when was the last time I talked to you about it. And it was 6 years ago, and I thought, you know what, there's got to be somebody besides me that needs a little refresher in this thing called the upper leap, the big leap, or moving through our consciousness. So I decided to take it on. He says, look, theologically, we only have one problem. And that problem is the upper limit. This thing called the upper limit. It's a glass ceiling. It's that place where, you know, you can get so far financially, so far in your relationship, so far in healing your body, so far in creativity, but then you can't go any farther. And you're kind of stuck. You moved, and that's good, and you're proud of yourself for moving, but you're not continuing to move. Here's what he says in the book. I have limited tolerance for feeling good. When I hit my upper limit, I manufacture thoughts that make me feel bad. The problem is bigger than just my internal feelings, though. I seem to have a limited tolerance for my life going well in general. When I hit my upper limit, I do something that stops my positive forward trajectory. I get into a conflict with my ex-wife, get into a money bind, or do something else that brings me back down within the bonds of my limit. Now, he has a lot of stories in this book. One of the reasons I like some of the more modern spiritual texts, and I consider this a modern spiritual text, one of the reasons I like them is because they tell stories, and I personally am a person who learns from other people's foibles, from other people's mistakes. So he talks about a guy who started a small business, and it did very well. And it did so well after about 5 years that a big company came in and offered him $3 million for his business and said that they would keep him on as the president for 2 years. And he thought, that's a great idea. Then I can go on and create something else. And so he started negotiations, and the negotiations were going very well until it came time for his vacation. And he was used to getting 4 weeks vacation. And the company that was buying him, their practice for their upper executives was to give a 2-week vacation to start. And he became so enraged about this, losing 2 weeks of his 4-week vacation, that they backed away from the deal, calling him too difficult to deal with. What he did was he sabotaged his success. He had hit an upper limit, and he sabotaged that success. You know, Mary Williamson says, we don't really feel failure, we feel success. That's what brings us into being saboteurs. So are you willing to feel your life be good? And are you willing to feel it be good all of the time? Without that feeling of, gosh, things are going so well. The other shoe's I know the other shoe's going to drop. You know that feeling of it's going so well, something bad has to happen? That's what we need to get out of our head. We have to get out of because every time we think something's bad's going to happen, every time we get into that idea that with the good must come the bad, forget about it. With the good can just come the good. We don't have to campaign for limitation. And when we get into that mantra of with the good must come the bad, what we've done is we've just campaigned for our limitation. We've got to push through the upper limit. And fortunately, we have a lot of examples. Do you know that when the steam engine was first invented, the medical community said it can never go past 30 miles an hour because 30 miles an hour, after that, the human body will blow up. Fortunately, not everybody agreed with that, and so they pushed past it, and now we can buy tickets on the internet for a future trip into space because somebody was willing to push through that upper limit. Jackie Robinson, he pushed through the upper limit that said only white people can white men can play professional baseball. And you watch. In the next, I don't know how many years, there will be a woman who will break through that upper limit and push through it, and we will now then see women playing professional ball in our life. And it's, kids come by it naturally. I'm a big TED Talk person. I love TED Talks. And I saw a TED Talk about a woman who had a group. She's kind of, think of her like a den mother of a Cub Scout troop, although this was a group of kids. She called them the divas. It was a little diva circle of 6 to 8 year old girls. And she worked with them at the community center, and her whole purpose was trying to improve their ability to be the authors of their own life, improve their ability to not have an upper limit, but to just create that which they wanted in life. And so they were talking one day, and one little girl said, "I'm so sick of my dad, he's always calling me. I wish he'd quit calling me." And another little girl said, "Well, you're lucky, at least your dad calls you once in a while." And they began to talk about their dads. And she realized this was a moment that she needed to give them some power. And she said to them, "If you could, what is one activity we could do to improve the relationship between you and your dads?" And one little girl said, "Well, my cousin had a father-daughter dance, and I think we should have a father," and they all just caught on. You know how when an idea is spoken into a circle of people and it just catches on like wildfire, and you can feel it, you can see it, and that's what happened. And so she said, "Oh, I know something's going on here." So the little girls, they figured out, they talked about what the decorations would be and what they would wear and what their fathers couldn't wear, and they had them dance. And so not long after the very successful dance, they talked about it for weeks afterwards. And then another little girl joined the group. And they were talking about the dance, and she said, "Well, my dad could never come to anything like that." And the girl said, "Well, why not?" And they said, "Because he's in prison." And one little girl said, "Well, couldn't he get out for a day?" See, they don't have upper limits. So, of course, he couldn't get out for a day, but this leader that was on the TED Talk said, "You know what? I had them write, I thought, I'm going to call the warden of this prison." It was right around there. "I'm going to call the warden of this prison and see if maybe we couldn't hold our dance there next year, the father-daughter dance." And the warden, she said, was phenomenal. He was fabulous. In fact, he was so excited about it because he knew that when prisoners have relationships with their children, they're less likely to come back in. And so he said, "Not only can you bring your girls and this little girl and her dad, but I'm going to open it up to a certain segment of prisoners here who have little girls, and I'm going to have them invite their daughters too. And we'll have a little bigger dance, and we'll get one of the restaurants in town to cater it, and we'll give the guys, we'll take them out of their jumpsuits for it, and we'll give them shirts and ties," and they did. And there were 18 little girls who came in addition to the divas who came with their dads. And how did that happen? They said there wasn't a dry eye in any of the guards' eyes. They saw a difference in these. They would pull out the chair for their daughters. They had a lovely meal. How did that happen? Little kids don't have upper limits. They don't even need to push through because there's nothing to push through. It's just there on their possibility, and that was a soul-changing thing. See, we have to get more willing. We have to get more willing to push through. Jesus didn't have an upper limit problem. Do you remember the story where he fed the 5,000 men and undisclosed number of women, which we don't understand? Because they were never disclosed, we don't know. See, Jesus didn't say, "Look, you signed up for my workshop, you didn't bring lunch, too bad." No. People were hungry and he fed them. He looked to the heavens and began to give them a nice lunch. Because he didn't understand that he couldn't. He didn't understand that there was anything keeping them from him. He went into what he is going to call, and I'm going to talk more about his genius. See, he didn't operate from a glass ceiling. Here's the problem with glass ceiling. The problem with glass ceilings is they're glass, and you can see through them. You can see the benefits through that ceiling. You can see what you might be able to have through that ceiling. But what you can't see is yourself there. That's the problem with glass ceilings. We need to not only shatter them, but not even see that they are there. See, because few of us understand this upper limit problem, then we think we're flawed. We think that we aren't destined to have our dreams fulfilled. We're not good enough. So many of us are right on the verge of attaining our goals, and we throw up a wall. We throw up a wall, and we don't have the tools to either knock that wall down or climb over that wall. That's what this book does. It provides us with some tools to either knock it down, or if you're more adventurous, run over it. But on the other side of that wall is where your own glory happens to be. See, one of the things that he says about this is we all have a thermostat. We have a thermostatic setting that we are comfortable with. And once we go through that thermostatic setting, once we go over the thermostatic setting, we become uncomfortable and we begin to sabotage ourselves. So for instance, say I was comfortable at making $100,000 a year. Now I don't make $100,000 a year, so don't reduce your giving. But so I was happy to have $100,000 a year, but then an opportunity comes along and someone wants to hire me to do some consulting work, and I figure out I can put another $50,000 a year in my income by doing this consulting work, and now I'm at $150,000. But here's what happens. I have pushed myself past my natural thermostatic setting, and once we do that, once we go beyond the thermostatic setting, we will find ways to bring ourselves back down to where we're in the comfort zone of the thermostat. Do you know that 60% of all people who win the lottery lose all of the money within 2 years? Why? Because they pushed themselves past their thermostatic setting and they weren't comfortable. They had to bring themselves back down in order to be comfortable. One of my heroes politically used to be Gary Weiner. I loved Gary Weiner's politics. I loved what he had to say. I loved his Anthony, not Gary, Anthony. I'm looking at Gary Weiner. Gary. I loved Anthony Weiner's politics. But do you know he sabotaged himself? He sabotaged. He got up and up and up. And he was not comfortable with the thermostatic setting, and he had to sabotage who he was. See, most of us do that too, in a small way, less publicly. We hit our limit, and then we have to reset. We have to reset ourselves. Now, this book will help us not only bring that thermostatic setting higher, but in some ways just rip it off the wall entirely. How do we do that? Well, first thing is that he says we have to understand a couple of zones, what he calls zones, that we live in. One of the first zones that he wants to talk about is that zone of incompetence. It's a time-wasting zone, and a lot of us spend time in it. Now, those of you who have, like me, tried to save $25 on Christmas Eve and decided you'd put the bicycle or the dollhouse together all by yourself, you are in your zone of incompetence. I've done that, and it makes you a hater. It does. It makes you a hater. I hated Christmas. I hated Jesus for being born. I hated my daughter. There wasn't one thing I didn't hate on that Christmas. Why? Because I was in my zone of incompetence in my life. The next one is your zone of competence. These are things that you do fine, but you don't need to do them because other people can do them just as well. Henrik said this is the zone that we stay in that we most often cause physical illness to come to ourselves, when we're in this zone of competence. Moses was in a zone of competence. When he was a sheep herder, he was a fine sheep herder. Nothing wrong with his sheep herding ability. But God had something different for him to do, something better for him to do, something bigger for him to do. And at first he did what we do. We resist getting out of our zone of competence. I'm fine, it's good. But you know what? It's not good. Your soul is stuck. It's stuck when you say in your zone of competence. The next one is your zone of excellence. And that's the most dangerous of all because it's seductive. Your zone of excellence. You're really good at it. You're very successful at it. And because you're good at it and because you're successful at it, people want to keep you here in your zone of excellence. Your family wants you to stay here in your zone of excellence because you're bringing home good money. Your company wants you to stay in your zone of excellence because you're supporting their mission successfully. But your zone of excellence is killing you. You will die in it. You will be one of those people who doesn't live 90 years, you live 1 year 90 times. Where you're just doing the same thing over and over. There's only one place you're going to find your bliss, and that's where we want everybody in this church to get to. This zone of genius. Jesus was in his zone of genius. You can be in your zone of genius. You know how you know you're in your zone of genius? When you're doing something, and even if they say, we're not going to pay you to do it anymore, you do it anyway. That's when you know you're in your zone of genius. Even if you're in that zone, and maybe it's not your job, maybe it has nothing to do with your pay, but you're in that zone and you're going to stay in that zone as much as you can while you go and do your work. Maybe you have to stay in your zone of competence a portion of the time, but you keep moving toward this zone of genius, doing it more and more and more every day so that you can feel what your soul is calling you to do, to be soul fulfilled. You know, soul fulfillment is not a religious state. It's a state of happiness. It has nothing to do with organized religion. It has everything to do with how you feel about yourself. Feeling so good about yourself that you feel good about other people. How great would the world be then? We wouldn't worry about who was Muslim and who was gay and who was transgender and who was, except for that it would make it interesting to know that, but other than that, we don't care. We're happy for everybody to be authentically who they are. That's what happens when you're in your zone of genius, because you're so happy about who you are inside of yourself. Hendricks says this. He says that the upper limit is unsolvable in your present state of consciousness. But then he goes on to correct himself. He says your upper limit isn't solvable at all. It must be dissolved. It's not to be solved. It's to be dissolved, to get rid of it, to get it away. And that's when we can soar. The truth is, every one of us have been in a state of genius, whether it's been for 5 minutes in our life or for a prolonged period of time. We know that feeling. And that's the feeling we need to reacquaint ourselves with. So we're going to keep doing this for the next couple of weeks. We're going to really get into this. How do I get into this zone of genius? And how do I stay there? And still make a living, still be happy, still be in good state with my family, but to stay there in that zone of genius. Well, that's only one of the things this church wants to do, is to get you all in your zone of genius. We also want to just make life better. So I want to call Elise up because she is going to give us a little testimonial about how this church has made her life better. Come on up.
Celebrating lives and building dreams. We've all heard it, and I want to share how CSA has done that for me. Much of my life I've floated along feeling something was just missing. Couldn't quite figure it out, couldn't put my finger on it. I just had this sad discontentedness. And then 9 years ago, I had what Reverend Georgia calls a spiritual 2x4. My ex-husband had an affair, left me. I foreclosed on my home, and even though I was tenured, I lost my teaching position, all within 5 months. My relationship, my home, and my job were pulled out from under me. I tried to build myself back up, but on many false premises. Although it appeared I was having a good time, I was still lacking connection, avoiding my truth, and hiding from my darkest fears. I was spiraling out of control and continually made choices that made me feel dumb and unworthy. I believed I deserved all the garbage that came my way. 4 years ago, at my rock bottom, I was deeply depressed, was abusive to myself verbally, mentally, and physically, and although I wouldn't have gone through with it, I often fantasized about death taking it all away. I couldn't keep living that way, and luckily a therapist recommended a 12-step love addiction program for me to address my addiction to unhealthy codependent relationships. A month into that program, I was at lunch with my friend Sarah Lucy explaining the program I was in. Later in the conversation, I also told her how I like to take a little bit of this religion and a little bit of that religion, the parts that work for me, and make my own thing up. She said that's exactly what her church does. And she said her church was extremely supportive of people in the 12-step program. She took out her phone, showed me a picture of these symbols up here, and just from the pictures I knew that was the place I belonged in. From the very first sermon, I was hooked. Reverend George's sermon gave me practical, applicable steps that I could immediately implement in my life. As I continued to come to CSA, I was amazed that every single Sunday, she was able to deliver messages of new ways of thinking that had such a profound effect on me. I'm so grateful I opened my ears to hear the spiritual truth, my eyes to see the spiritual truth, and my heart to receive the spiritual truth, that I am whole, perfect, and complete. I continued to feed myself with Reverend George's messages and started to take workshops, classes, and read the books that the sermons are based around. There are many, but I'll only highlight a few. The first was a workshop right after church, and in that short 3 hours, I was able to finish off the last $5,000 of my $45,000 worth of credit card debt, and I did it in 6 months like I declared I would do in front of that group. I also got the gift of the science of getting rich from that particular workshop. Highly recommend it. I then took foundations and learned about how creating fertile ground within our minds allows us to receive what we want. We can want what we want, but we need a landing pad. Being ready to receive is just as important, if not more important, than asking. It takes consistency, determination to guard your thoughts, but it is the best work you'll ever do. One of the books that Reverend Georgia also did a sermon on was The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukov. Through these pages, I was able to understand that we go into contract with certain people in this lifetime for our own expansion. Through those pages, I was finally able to lovingly forgive and have compassion for 2 family friends that had sexually abused me as a child. I was able to truly forgive, let go, understand, and grow from that experience. And my love and compassion for all people, including abusers, has grown exponentially. You see, everything is either love or a call for love.
No exceptions.
3 years ago, I joined Prosperity Plus, not knowing just what an impact it was going to have in my life in 2 very specific ways. In the class, I got to create a vision for what I wanted in my life and learn the importance of celebrating it as if it's already happened. I held the vision of a loving relationship very close to my heart. I mentally and emotionally prepared myself to receive love. 6 months later, I had my first date with the most beautiful man, inside and out, that I've ever seen or known. 2.5 years later, I smile every single morning because I get to wake up next to him. The second way Prosperity Plus changed my life is that something cracked in me and I no longer wanted to teach and wanted to go into life coaching. I had no idea how I was going to go about it, and I felt overwhelmed. It took me 2 years, but with more books, it's written right here, like Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. Didn't plan that. I just knew there was a bigger plan for me, and that letting go of things that you outgrow makes room for new experiences and more expansion. In that time, I also took Tanya Beverly's class on meditation and spiritual mind treatment. And although I still struggle with the meditation practice, I use this tool of spiritual mind treatments multiple times a day, and they work. I also attended 2 vision board workshops here and put a vision together for exactly what I want, something I can look at every single day. Exactly a year ago, after repeatedly looking at what I truly wanted on those vision boards, I took the leap and left my job of 16 years. I now own my own self-care business, helping others create the life of their dreams through massage, energy work, and life coaching, connecting the body and mind, where I get to use and teach these same science of mind principles that I've been practicing at CSA for 4 years, because they're tried and true and they work. I literally wake up giddy every single morning because I've created a job that doesn't feel like work. It's a win-win for everybody. Since I've decided to go with the flow of my heart, I also no longer have migraines, which I used to get on a regular basis. I've learned that the body's messages are just ways to steer you back into alignment to your true path of living on your greatest joy. And these science of mind principles are the blueprint for that. If you find any inspiration in anything here shared at CSA, I urge you to take action. Take the class, go to the workshop, read the books. You are worth it. Heaven is a place on earth. And the key is right here. If I can transform my life and go from living by default to deliberate creation in regard to my relationship, my vocation, my health and well-being, and my time and money freedom, anybody can do it. Do not underestimate your power, the power of these principles, or the power of CSA community. If you want to celebrate your life and build your dreams, you're in the right place.
Because what it says to me is not only is CSA doing a good job presenting the principles, but we have people willing to work with them. Not just come here and be entertained on Sunday morning, but actually work with these principles. And that's a beautiful thing.